Okay, welcome back. We made it through another week of fall semester. Always good to get to a Friday. Any issues or things that came up so far, like working through homework or looking at readings, thinking about like general computational thinking or specific, I don't know what this error means kind of problem? Nothing yet? At least like nothing to announce yet. I'll check in, see where people are at, and then come back up, see if any demos or walkthroughs will help.
Yeah, actually, we reached out to the sponsor. I just got an email back from this morning. Yeah, we met yesterday. Did you see them in class? Did you guys like? Does he seem like cartoons? Yeah, no, they really like. I think they. Yeah, so you do have to do like. Because yeah. Probably that was just like the. Yeah. So one of my teammates is specific, and the other one was my last day, and then the other one was also my last day. Yeah. I mean, I was like, if I'm gonna get something I didn't want, that sounds seems kind of weird because it's one of those ones where all of us perform some more tests and stuff like that. I wish I could. Well, I think yours would be harder if you want to be harder, right? Yeah. So the design. Like if you want to make a really impressive project, like art project, but like you just kind of wanted to finish it. Yeah. So it's just one of those. I mean, I'm not really worried about that. I'm just worried about kids. I'm I never got to respond to it. Like that's something creative and not show. I can show you what I said in the sponsors if you want. Yeah. Here. Where in the background? Yeah. No. No. John would be yeah. Oh, okay. Oh. Everybody else like heard. I was gonna say this is just like American tradition. I mean, if you really yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, if they should go see it, just tell them it's okay. You might honestly just hate it. Yeah, I don't really know where you want to do that. Because I guess it would be unfair to the people whoever they're getting this stuff with. That's the thing, we also have PC yeah, one of my other friends talked about that. Like, he doesn't want to reach out to the sponsor because it's not just them, it's always project, but they were also like, have contacts with people that would. So yeah, I don't. I'm assuming if the professors wanted you to contact them together, they would give it you. Like, I'd probably just reach out to them and say like, hey, whatever. And we're doing project with some DC students that will reach out to you as well. I mean, you can meet up with them to send it, you just send it to them. You just send it to your contacts and then I'll just CC them. But considering the fact that I actually even have professors in mind though. I didn't even have the professors in mind though. I'm saying for to find out the ECE chip. Oh yeah, just do both. Is everybody still working on that? I got it. Kevin's our It's really not that hard. You just kind of have to like keep doing ecosystem. I don't even know if the way I did it is like it's like kind of cheating. Like kind of like I don't know. Forces it to be right. If that makes sense. Yeah, there's some. I mean, I think we're supposed to do this, right? This is just printing and no, it's not. That's all I'm going with there. By the way, this one is literally just copy and paste. No, like you don't even have to like. It's exactly the same. You just move the like that's what they are. We did have. No, I can just really get like, yeah, I should stop. I don't take care of that thing. Not. Yeah, make sure somebody tells you what you're actually doing. You have like that recording. Yeah, no, that was happening to my brother. He was like, he was going to community college for credit, and then they were like, yeah, I don't transfer, and then he like did it. He came back and they're like, no. No, I mean he eventually got it, but like they're ignoring it. When you sent out. You said that was like 4 classes in like 5 weeks. Like you're gonna be realistic. We're talking about like is like really profitable. Like you're what if he brings it back? So like if he brings it back,
where should we start? Yeah, let's do, I'll go in order. So we're we were having some discussions about like functions and how they work and kind of debugging those and how to set them up. So general kind of structure of the function is that you have this DEF statement that's beginning to tell Python like, hey, I want to create a function, I want to be able to call it. Whatever I put in the parentheses are things that the function expects to see. I could also have like default values in here, like if I wanted to have a frequency like sine of omega something. So, but this is just extra. You don't have to do that, but I just wanted to show you like how to give it a default value if you're interested. And then the colon is like, okay, now I can tell it what's gonna happen inside that function. So then this sine x is gonna be that sine of x, and here I'm giving it like a frequency of 1 radian per second. Then there's one last thing that I need to like get the things that I want from the function. Do you know what that is? Or are we good? Function is defined, because here the function is defined and it's going to run these two things. Yeah. I don't need to define x, no, because x is going to be whatever input I give it to the function. And because this x and that x are the same, whatever value I pass in will be used in those calculations. So let's just try it if we're not sure, right? Sine and cosine of 0, and it gives me nothing. Maybe I need more values. Or do you already see what we need? Let's give it linspace, 0 to pi. And I get nothing. So print statements are great for like debugging of if the question is like, is SX actually, is it being created? What is it? What shape is it? Print statements are great for that. But they end up being really cumbersome if you're always printing every time you run a function. But you're exactly right. Like we gotta tell Python we want that output. So instead of a print statement, we can say return SX and CX. And now those two variables that were created, in general, they get thrown out unless you specifically say return them as part of this function. And now I get an array of 50 different 0 to 1, and then back to 0, and then 1 to 0, and then back to -1. So the sines and cosines all get printed out there. And let's go 2 pi, right? Cool. When you put those like triple quotes directly under that DEF, now you're writing what's called a doc string. Whatever I put in the doc string is what gets printed out when I ask for help in that function. So if I write an unhelpful doc string, like figure it out yourself, Ryan, future Ryan, then very much it doesn't help me at all. The most likely person that gets hurt when you write bad doc strings is you. So be kind to yourself, like remind yourself why you wrote this, what is it supposed to do, what were the inputs, what kind of outputs were you expecting. Or maybe you just have like, maybe you have it out for yourself, your future self. So instead, I would do something like sin cos of x returns the sine and cosine of input x with an optional input of frequency for I guess usually I write arguments. Inputs are fine, but argue and now I'm just creating something like that's a little more helpful to, again, my future self, because I'm most likely the person that's going to go back and read this, of what were the arguments that I was trying to define, and then what were the outputs that were supposed to be there. Again, you're not going to get it. It's not going to help you debug your doc strings, but whatever you put in there, that's what you're going to get. So then using, when we have two outputs listed here, sometimes this is a little weird. Like a lot of times we think of a function in terms of like a math function, like f of x always gives me one thing. But for computers, they don't care. Like you could give it, here we're giving it x and we're getting two outputs. We could do sine, cosine, tangent, exp, like we could give it 1,000 different things to calculate from that x. And we could just return and list a whole bunch of stuff that either we want or we don't want. So when I run the function here, comment that one, I can output, let's do like y1 and y2 are equal to that sine cosine. So now I'll get two. Now y1 is sine of x, y2 is cosine of x. And I'm using different variables to show that you don't have to use the same output variables that you define like in your function. They can be whatever you want. So when I plot x and y1, I get sine of x. And when I add another plot of x and y2, I get cosine x. So everything's working just the way that I want it to, with only a few errors along the way. Yeah.
How do you separate those different plots?
Oh, you want to make different plots?
Yeah, I have mine list them together, but how would you separate them?
So like if you want fully different, like you want to make two different plots, then you can use that this thing of figure, and that creates a whole new figure.
Okay, seems about right.
Is that? Yeah, I think that's the same as MATLAB. Other option might be like if we want them on different plots, but within the same figure. I think we would say above subplot. How does this one work? N rows, N calls. PLT dot subplot, like 1, 2, 1, something like that. Yeah, if we wanted it like side by side, we could say 1 row, 2 columns, plot 1, then plot 2. I think top and bottom is probably better. Maybe 2 rows, 1 column, right? That looks a little better to me. Like sine on the top, cosine on the bottom. But yeah, there's all sorts of cool. This one is nice because the x-axis, since it's the same x-axis for both, then I can directly see that between the two. And they're both going 1 to -1, so I don't have to worry about that y-axis as much. But yeah, those are the different options for like multiple plots within like one script of plotting, either subplots or new figures. Okay, other thing that came up as I was kind of talking to some people and troubleshooting some stuff was time-it, was using time-it, and here I wanted to talk about like why we would use time-it before like just showing you this is how to use it. So time-it is specifically figuring out what would be a bottleneck in your, if your code is taking 5 minutes to run something, time-it is a great little tool to figure out like what is taking the most time. Like, is it opening and closing Excel files? Is it doing this kind of complicated function? Usually function calls are like nanosecond kind of stuff, but what's the difference? Like, as I'm making changes, why are things faster or slower? So when we're using time-it, we want to make a minimal, just the minimal number of things that we're trying to time. Don't try to like do the whole, it's not meant to like do a whole bunch of stuff and then time everything all at once. So I think this is what I saw like most people doing. I think ChatGPT was tutoring of like initialize the array and then create a for loop to go through all the i's and all the j's. Is that right? Like the ChatGPT sort of response. And this works for I in range of 10, for j in range of 10, a99 is I times j, and I'll just, then a90, oh yeah, first we have to also say each ij is going to be that I times j. And then when we look at it, we do in fact get like a multiplication table all the way from like 0, 0, 1 times 9, and then all the way up to like 9 times 9. So it is getting what we want. Have you heard of list comprehension? That term? If you're like interacting with ChatGPT and it gives you this output, say, please rewrite this using list comprehension. That's a nice like Python. If you're claiming you know Python, one thing that you should know a little bit about is list comprehension. You don't have to know everything in Python, but let's rewrite these 4 lines. I'm just going to turn them into 2 lines with list comprehension. So I don't need to initialize the array. I'm just going to create 2 nested lists. And this is why it's called list comprehension, because you're creating a list, and inside that list, I'm going to create some loops. So I times j for I in range of 10. Go into my next like outer list and say for j in range of 10. So I took those like 4 lines of stuff and turned it into one thing of just like do the 4 loops inside this list and then just save all that stuff as a list of lists. And when I do that, it runs, and then I end up with this like list of lists, which ends up being kind of nice. Performance-wise, there's probably no difference. Let's see. So here, actually, I don't want to. I want to do this. I don't want to like print stuff out. I just want to run the calculations with the time it thing. And so mechanics of using time it, at least like in Jupyter, it's got to be the very first line of your cell block, because it's called a magic command. So whenever you use those like % time its, there are some other functions that are being called. And oh, actually it saves a little bit of time, right? If I use list comprehension versus like initializing it and then creating like a for loop. Yeah, so about half the time, roughly, right? It goes from 16 down to 8.9. So it saved a little bit of time. But this is a great case where I'm not like printing anything, I'm not doing anything else. I'm just looking at a very small piece of code and comparing 2 different ways of doing that one calculation. That's a great use case for time it. If you're timing how long it takes to import things and make plots and all that stuff, that's like you're trying to the term that I've heard before is like you're measuring the weight of the captain by measuring the weight of the boat. It's like, yeah, sooner or later you'll get there, but the captain's like 150 pounds, the boat 150 tons. So with and without the captain, the boat is still 150 tons. That's what'll happen as if you start importing other stuff. And now compare this to like you have this NP mesh grid of if I could spell. So now we're down at like 400 nanoseconds rather than 1,000 times more. Not quite 1,000 because we're in the microsecond, but still half a microsecond versus 8 to 10 microseconds, depending on how you set up your for loops and how you initialize things. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for sticking with me on the exploration of time it and all of that. What else were people, so those were the things that I saw come up as I was kind of walking around. What else came up? What else are you working on? Just thinking. Do you know how to get to these resources? Yeah. This makes it okay. There's the yeah. Do you know how to get to this is like all the material and then then you have the same thing that we're working in right now. Once you log in, those are the tool are the same. You do the same with everybody else. And yeah, so you can sign in with Google or you can create an account. Are you running yeah, so click on, if you click on that Jupyter Hub, that'll get and that way, like, all the question prompts are part of the question and answer, rather than just like a super long Python script where it's not sure. Like, where you said yes. Yeah, but I used to get 40 years rather than yeah. VS Code does have integration. So you can download that VS Code. Dude, I tried that shit. It's so complicated. I'm like, dude, it's annoying, but it's also my steps inside. I'm so great at that too. And then ship or you can It should auto save in general. All right, thanks a lot. Have a good weekend. Then we'll be back on Monday and keep working through.